who scanned the QR code last month. And that's a number that grew about 54% year over year, grew at a faster rate than smartphone ownership. So we're seeing, I think, consumer adoption. We're seeing an explosion in the availability of QR codes, which creates awareness. And we're seeing these codes be scanned by a pretty attractive group of folks. It's a little bit early adopter, it skews male, tends to be on the coasts. But the people who are scanning QR codes are 3 times more likely to be shopping online on their phone, more than 3 times more likely to be showrooming in a retail environment. And a third of the people scanning QR codes have an income of 100K or better. So I actually am very bullish on what we're seeing in terms of the metrics for adoption. It's still obviously very early days, but I think a lot of the stuff I read in the headlines just is not attached to reality.
I'm the designated hater on this panel on some level. I mean, Kargo works with a lot of major publishers. We control or work with at least 50 major publications, and we have attempted, and again, my experience goes over the last 2 years plus. So, you know, I think that potentially we should try it again. But in the last 2 years, as we've attempted to integrate QR codes into literature and to get people to action on them, to download apps, we haven't seen the uptake that we would have hoped. You know, given the circulation of some of the collected magazines that we've used them on, we just haven't seen them sort of with the uptake that you would expect, given their kind of circulation. Now that might be for 2 reasons. One is, I think the creative is really important. So if the creative is not good and there's not a good call to action, then there's no reason to use a code. 2 is, you know, and I think another big issue with codes is that people spend the time to sort of unlock it. It's not exactly like it's an easy process. Sometimes it doesn't work the first time. And if the URL or if the experience that you push to is crappy, then basically people are not going to do it again. And so I think that as an industry, we should almost police what is QR codable, because if it ends up being something that people spend time doing and it ends up being a disappointment, since it sometimes takes a little bit of extra time, it's not that great. But that being said, with NFC, the question is, as it gets easier, will things start to change?
Can I jump? Actually, I want to add one thing to this, which is, actually, I'll probably add a bunch of things, but I think, you know, to what Harry's saying is, remember personalized URLs, right? Vanity URLs. When they first came out, everyone thought it was great. You'd go to, you know, LexusIsAwesome.com, and you'd go there, and it was the same freaking Lexus site as if you just typed Lexus.com, and every brand did this, and then all of a sudden the light went on, and they realized, hey, this sucks, right? You know, and by that I mean the consumers said, this sucks. You're not giving me any value. I'm going through the trouble of typing in a URL, and you're not giving me any value, right? NFC, QR code, snap tag, it's all code. It just points somewhere. So the problem is where we're pointing people is the problem. We are not sending them to something that is personalized, relevant, in context, and is valuable to them. And a great perspective is to look at it, which is when you scan a QR code or you tap NFC, it unlocks a door. And that door can either go to a closet or an amusement park. And right now, we're shoving everyone in a closet.
So, all right, so, yeah, I mean, Harry said something that was really important that I want to pull out, and it's about the content, right? I mean, but it's also not about just redirecting someone to somewhere. If that's all we want to do is just say, hey, this is a replacement for a URL, then this discussion is really just about how many keystrokes are we eliminating from someone on a mobile device, and that's not what this is.
90% of the activity, we're in agreement. Yeah. Most of it's just URL direction. No one's going to actually use microphone.
Mostly using URL direction, nothing beyond that.
Right, and that's really the shortcoming thing. I mean, you can go back to like the early days of the internet. What was the first thing that we did on the internet? We took our print ads and we put them up and we called it a website, right? And no one used it. It was sucky. So we had to figure out, what do we do with this medium? Well, you know, the stuff that we've been doing with the Olympics, the stuff that we're doing with our largest customers, none of them are just pointing to a URL. I mean, those days are kind of like done for people who've been doing this for a while. They're doing, you know, Twitter campaigns that cause, you know, contests around how many likes you can get on it. We're doing things like Facebook references and influencer studies associated with what people are scanning. We're doing dynamic codes now, where if I scan it and every other person on the panel scans the exact same code at the same time, we get a completely different experience based on our previous scan history and our predetermined desires and likes. When you start doing that, now you're in a completely different realm. But that's really what's important. It's got to happen. It can't just be used for the the obvious free solution, which is all you can do is go to a URL and heaven forbid anybody ever changes that content, you can't do anything about it.
I completely agree with Mike. And I think that what we saw was marketers using the QR code as a tool to do what marketers wanted them to do, which was go to my website, see my ad, scan the code, go to my next ad. And you've got to start with the consumer, and what does the consumer want? And a lot of it has to do with what our companies can offer marketers as additional technologies and additional capabilities. If you snap a tag on Dos Equis right now, you can join the most interesting academy. We're not taking you to a website, we're taking you directly into a promotion, and we've seen great results, and I'm sure Mike's seen great results, when there's a strategy behind it that puts the consumer in the middle and gives the consumer value.
Maybe just briefly, where are, because it seems to me this, are we talking about a lack of good ideas here by marketers? And if so, who's going to help them, cross that chasm, right?
I think it's ideas, and I think it's also expectations. I mean, honestly, a lot of it, and you said expectations, and I almost come back to you and say, what is your expectation? Because first of all, it comes down to how well targeted is the media, what's the offer, what's in it for the consumer, and we've started to chart out activation rates against what we're calling value offers and just basically immediacy offers. So if we're selling product, we have a much lower expectation of someone activating it to buy the product because there's a lower value proposition. But you have to tie the value associated with that snap or scan a lot higher because I'm buying something, I'm not just going to a site. And so I think setting expectations is a huge piece of what we in the industry need to do.
I'll give you another one too. So one of our best campaigns ever, so just to put some metrics on this, so it was a 3-month-long campaign. Can't give you the name of the brand, they asked us not to, but it's a big, big brand. So in the 3-month period that they were in promotion, and the content was sporting content. So it was, if you scan the code during the week, you got a certain kind of content. If it got closer to game day on the weekend, you got different kind of content. If you scanned it during the game, then you got highlights that happened just moments ago. So you got amazingly relevant content on it. So that generated over 2 million scans in a 3-month period. I mean, nobody gets that kind of response rate, and that's just a phenomenal kind of thing. So when I hear people say, oh, we're not getting any scan results, usually what we run into is, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, we're just going to our homepage and it's not mobilized. Well, great, that's what you would expect to happen. Or it's another thing where there's nothing about it that's tied to what the promotion is or what the advertising campaign is or what the brand is trying to communicate. It comes into, to your question, is it about the lack of ideas? Sometimes it's just about the lack of pre-thinking about it. Right? I'll get calls still pretty frequently from an ad agency that says, we're going to print tonight, we forgot to put a code on it, give me a code right now. And it's like, cool, what would you like the code to do? And they're like, we'll figure it out tomorrow. It's like, okay, great. So we're not exactly expecting very much from results from that kind of thing, but it does, they check the box that, for the brand, the agency put a code on it. So we're out doing still a ton of evangelizing and education around this.
Well, I think the QR codes are like mobile payment, right? Mobile wallets. Everyone's talking about mobile wallets, but a mobile wallet in and of itself is not an incredibly valuable tool. A QR code in and of itself is not an incredibly valuable tool. It's about what is it driving, right? What is actionable? How is it tied into the overall experience for the consumer? So, Catalina has the largest personalized digital media network in the world, right? So we see, at least in the US, maybe not the world, but we hit 75% of US households, right? So we can personalize what the person sees. So imagine, if you could, that when they scan the QR code, the things that those folks down at the end have done, that Mike and Nicole have done, I think are brilliant, where you're giving the shopper options. What if you added personalization and context to that? Now you're getting to the point where there's real value, because when I scan it, what I see is different from everybody on the panel, not based on general demographic information, or maybe because I have an iPhone 4S, or if I have a 5, or from an Android, right? That's easy, that's basic demographic stuff. But based on what I've purchased as an individual will really change the value for the consumer, and I think will drive adoption to the next level.
And do you think that is, or does the panel think that's about, again, it's kind of marketing 101, that many marketers are going in there and not actually thinking about the who, right? They're thinking, we're kind of doing this thing, or we're kind of doing it to everybody, but it is about moving more towards personalization and getting much more into the, well, who am I going for? People who have preloaded this on their phone or who have downloaded the reader?
This is the 90s all over again, right, Mike? I mean, look, we went through this with the internet, with e-commerce, right? I work for a company called ATG, which was one of the biggest e-commerce platform providers. And we saw this exact same thing, right? From brochureware to, to actual, rich media, to personalized content, to e-commerce. Mobile is going through the same thing. QR codes are a fundamental piece of that. So we're just seeing the natural evolution, but hopefully we're smarter this time, and we move it a hell of a lot faster.
It's always the hope.
Yeah. So the other thing, I agree with John, the code is not, I mean, we don't even sell codes anymore. I mean, nothing on our website says you can buy a code. It's like, that's not the point, right? It's a platform capability that allows you to do all this other stuff, and you can do this customization, you can have this personalization pieces of it. The thing that he didn't talk about, though, that we think is enormously valuable is the analytics and business intelligence that comes from it, right? We can go down and not only, give aggregate information, but we can give hotspot information about where are people when they're doing the scanning, down to like street level detail, and we can aggregate that up so that people can really say, well, the rest of my marketing campaign, I know how to optimize that because I know where the people are, right? So it's not just location, but it's the rich data that's there. You combine that with a customer loyalty thing, when you tie that into any kind of opt-in where people say, hey, I'm going to express a desire, if you tie it into scan history or purchase history, you can now do some things that the brands, if you can get to the marketing guy and explain to them that this is not just about pushing someone to a promotion. This is about lifetime customer value. This is about how do I get an ROI? How do I target influencers and major audiences? That's the stuff that's of enormous value, and it's got long-term value too.
But Mike, when you're talking about location, it's not triggered off the code. It's just that you have the location APIs built into your reader, right?
Well, location, if you're not doing anything to get it, then you're going to ignore it. Now, is it built into the code itself? Of course not. But and it's not necessarily linked only to the reader, right? I mean, there are techniques that you don't have to use ScanBuy for me to give you tremendous amounts of data about what the person scanned. I just care about, does the code generated on my platform?
But what I'm saying is that the location component of it, in terms of how you guys, or how anybody would implement it, you almost use the reader as the mechanism, sort of the Trojan horse to get the location piece.
And I'm giving you no, we don't use anything as a Trojan horse. We're using just browser technology in order to get it done, and I really don't care whose reader you use. But I do get location 85% of the time, and it's growing every day. So.
But what I think my point is, and I'm sorry that I'm not being clear. I think the point is that you're combining a number of different components to actually provide real value to the people, and it goes beyond the code itself.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's only in packaging those variety of different components together that you actually create real value.
Well, location in absence of an action isn't terribly valuable, usually, or at this point in time, I would say. It seems to me that, again, maybe that we go with this notion of maybe we're making progress, and the older we get, things get a little more easy. It does seem to me that maybe measurement, like we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what to measure, or just training people to better understand the things that we can already measure. Like it seems like I'm sure we could all agree on what are the key things you see when people scan codes, and what marketers need to be looking at. Is that an accurate kind of statement?
I mean, we do two different levels, right? I mean, level one is, because no one else is doing a comScore new to releasing data on this, so that part's great. We've been putting out these quarterly trend reports that give overall market assessment. So it's, this percentage of the people who scanned in the last quarter are male versus female. Here's a shift from the previous one, right? Thrilled that comScore is here doing more of that kind of stuff because it gets more data out there since we're only reporting on what we know. So they're getting more of an aggregated view. But how do we tie that into the next level of, it's not just about, the industry status. How do you tie that into CRM? How do you tie it into, what business intelligence is needed to make good decisions at the company on how to deal with your customers? Most of the marketing guys know exactly what they're looking for, right? It's a question of have they designed the campaign in total where the codes are a piece of it in order to let them measure that effectively. I can give you examples of a retail outlet that wanted to measure store uplift. And it wasn't just uplift in revenue. What they were looking for is, could they affect store traffic patterns? So once we got them to clearly state that that's what they wanted to measure, we could help them in the creative side of it and say, okay, yes, if you do the following kinds of things with the codes, so you're going to put them first in print, first in billboards, that say, if you scan this now, look in this magazine and you'll get this kind of information. So we set it up so that the only way you would know that the store was going to be open during these times and that there was going to be a special sale on was you had to scan the code elsewhere first. So you could absolutely measure the uplift in store traffic at those given hours because that's how the program is set up. We saw 7% uplift in store traffic for that, right? So if you tell us what you want to measure, you can put something in.
Or if we help you figure out what you want to measure.
I can give an example. We're working on an ROI model, and we think that it should be actions that are measured. Free sample requests, coupon requests, likes, follows, tweets, pins, purchasing product, asking for store locations. So we're measuring actions, and a lot of marketers are using the word engagement. But we did a program for Lancome, and in print ads, they used a Facebook snap tag. And in our platform, it's not just take me to Facebook, it's like us on Facebook for a chance to win a year's supply of eye makeup. So I like Lancome, but just because I see a Facebook icon on your page doesn't make me want to run off and like your brand. But if you'll give me something, I'll do it right there. So what we measured for them was how many people snapped the tag, liked the brand, gave us their name and mailing address to enter the program, then went out and shared it on Facebook or Twitter. So then we're assigning value points to how much is a snap worth, how much is a like worth, how much is data capture worth, and how much is a share worth. And then it puts it into a model so that they can actually measure ROI, and they measured a 270% ROI on that program. So we're at least helping them, because they came to us and said, how do we, I'm sure you get this too, was this successful? And so we're helping them come up with a model based on metrics that they can extrapolate using their other media models based on actions.
So very much it sounds like we're still in the time of where vendors are helping marketers understand how to actually formulate ROI and sometimes objectives, which would still be kind of a fairly early stage situation. I'd like to turn it a little bit and talk about consumers. How many people here have ever used a QR code? Okay, you're not a representative sample. I don't believe you. From the consumer experience side, okay, that's what we're getting. How many people had problems using said QR codes? Okay. So, good foreshadowing of the question here. What is this like on the consumer side? And maybe even, I know Mark, you talked a little bit, like what's the usual context where someone's actually even doing this? Are they walking around in a store? Are they sitting home reading magazines? And what do we as an industry need to do, whether it's technological or educational or distribution-wide, just to make this a little less kludgy than it seems to be anyway?
Yeah, I mean, we have some data on that which kind of gives you the snapshot, and I think there's a bigger thing happening here. But we saw until August, right? The predominant use case was people at home, sitting on the couch, I'm making that part up, scanning a magazine, right? And a return product information. That's the typical thing. What we've seen happen over the last year is a dramatic increase in the number of people who are scanning product packaging and the number of people who are doing that in retail stores. In both those use cases, though, I think, I hear Harry's frustration, but also, we have seen this move before in mobile many times in different areas, right? There was a period where there was deep fear in the mobile industry that the mobile games industry was just going to collapse because the experience was so crappy. And after you paid $5 for that Spider-Man game from your carrier, and it sucked, you were never ever going to download a game again. And so this whole industry was going to, right, that didn't happen. Right, so this is a period where there are some bad experiences. There needs to be. I don't think it's about standards. I think it's about education. Gravitating toward these really rich experiences that pull consumers in. But the core thing that's happening here, and this is the trend that I just think there should be no question about, is we're watching the way that these devices are connecting the digital and the physical world, in real time. And they're doing it when people are out on the go. They're doing it when they're at home. And whether that's scanning a QR code, or we talked about NFC, still tiny penetration, right? That to me is the larger backdrop for this discussion, which is we finally have a world where ubiquitous connectivity, ubiquitous, very powerful devices and smartphones are now owned by half the population. And the trick for marketers is figuring out how you use that technology to connect it to what's happening in the physical world and create experiences that are worth coming back, that tie you to the brand, make you want to buy things, make you a better person, and so on, right? That to me is the big picture here, and there shouldn't be any debate.
But I think one of the challenges that we have, right, is so our company has been pioneering on the mobile commerce side, and one of the questions that we always get is when are mobile coupons going to hit some level of real of impact? When are they going to hit that tipping point? And the answer is it's both up to us and not up to us. It's up to the consumer, right? But it's up to us to deliver a great experience. Let me give you an example of a not great experience with a QR code. Anyone, I'm not gonna ask, everybody's been in a Best Buy. Anyone try scanning a QR code in Best Buy by the TVs? Anyone else try it? Hey, did you get anything? Did you know that Best Buy has Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi networks? Did you know? But most people don't, right? It's not a broadcast SSID, right? So therein lies the fail. They go through the effort to put the QR code there, right? Which they believe will thwart show grouping because it's going to send it to content that they own. Great idea. Fail, it's in the back of the store and I have no signal, right? So, and then they don't tell me about Wi-Fi. So how many times will we fail in scanning something because of, candidly, stupidity, right? QR codes in a subway with no Wi-Fi signal, right? A QR code on the top of a building. A QR code on hanging behind an airplane as it flies over, right? These are things that don't make sense, right? So as we continue to do that, we are going to basically make them, worthless. And until they have real value, and we believe that a big piece of that, right? I mean, personalization is our business. That's what we do. We believe that that's a key piece of this because, to your point, when I scan a QR code, there is an absolute shitload, excuse my French, of information that you have right then and there. I know where you are. I know what you're doing, right? You could do an outdoor campaign and every QR code could be different. And then, so you know literally where I am, right? Whether you're using my phone's GPS or using the scanning data, you could try different creatives. You could try different offers against different creatives. You can use purchase data. You can use so much stuff, but we are all too freaking lazy to do it. We call Mike up at 11 o'clock and say, get me a QR code. Or you do what I did, and I did that, absolutely. Actually, for our ad in Ad Week, right? Our QR code, right? Natanya said to me, we need a QR code. I'm like, oh shit. I went out to his site, created a QR code, and said exactly that. I was laughing when he said that. I'm like, I'll figure out where it goes later. Now, we at least created a mobile site that you go to. So it was semi-relevant, semi-intelligent, but still not a great execution. And I'm dying to find out how many people actually scan the QR code when we're done. So it is completely in our hands. We're screwing this up. It's a great technology. Whether you're using a snap tag, or you're using a QR code, or you're using NFC, it's great. But the complete and utter lack of relevance is where we're failing.
Let me give you a couple other thoughts on this too, because some of this is kind of fun. I mean, we have maintained this book called The Wall of Shame. People have done some unbelievably crazy things with QR codes, and some of them have. There's two, which is the malicious story one, and then I'll kind of tie it back into the question. But I think everybody will appreciate this. So someone went out and put out a QR code that literally all it did was trigger a download of a 3 gigabyte PDF file. Now think about what that caused, right? You scanned it, every one of the new phones just does background download, so you think nothing happened, right? Unless you happen to notice up at the top that little folder thing, but most people don't see that, right? So what happens, you come back half an hour later, Verizon shut you down because you've now exceeded your data plan for the month, and your phone is dead because you cooked the battery. So awesome experience, everybody, great. So, one example of how does someone know visually, a consumer, if you think about it that way, that this is a good code versus not a good code, right? And that is something that is a challenge to everybody up here on the panel, and that's one reason why we have brand usage guidelines and best practice guidelines and so forth around distinguish the code, make it so that it doesn't look like someone just went to a free QR generator and just created something and stuck it up on the bottle. It's got to have something more to it that makes it user identifiable at the point of sale or the point of scan more generally. The other one that I'll share with you is just the crazy economics that people are making the craziest kinds of decisions. I hate to do this to one brand, but you'll all know it as soon as I tell you. So this happened with Guinness, which they did, the mugs, which were awesome. That when they were filled with Guinness beer, you could actually see the QR code and scan it. Well, the first ones that they came out with, someone decided, even though that they had said don't use free codes because we need to be able to update it and change the content and so forth and all of that, when it finally got to the agency that built it, they said, oh, I don't want to pay the $100 for the platform use for the week or something like that they did it. They used a free QR code and they put a typo in it. They printed over 1 million of these mugs up, and they had to scrap them all, because when you scanned it, it came up 404 file not found error through the browser, right? So then, what was the cost of that, right? So this is just an example that the public didn't see because it was caught just before it went out, but my goodness, it's that kind of thing that's just, you can't make mistakes like that. These are just like the 101 kinds of things of, wow, don't do that kind of thing. You need to be able to update the content. You need to be able to track it. You need to be able to do things with it to change it. To John's point, test what's working. If this video doesn't work, put up another one. There's only one way you can do that. You need more to it than just, an experiment.
So how are we going to, this is very chicken and egg, isn't it? So marketers need to not make typos and treat it seriously and do the right things, but that's got to be tied towards, I feel like more consumers doing it. Like, how is this equilibrium going to shift? I'm assuming you have some opinions here, yeah?
Yeah, I think Mike and I would say work with us. So.
That would be my impression based on the panel so far, clearly.
I think we're presenting something that's, we don't want you to be scared to get in and do a QR code or a snap tag. I think that's what we're here for. We're here to help you, guide you, share best practices. We've actually told a client no. When a client wanted to just put a snap tag on some creative and not put a call to action, we said no, because I want to work with you the next time. I don't want you to put something out there, be disappointed, and not call me the next time. So I think part of it's, work with us, but to me, a lot of it is have a plan. When Bonnet was up here earlier, he talked about at Mondelez and at Kraft, they're setting out a plan. And I don't know if it's a 2-year plan or a 5-year plan, but that's what he's doing. He's on a mission and he's on a plan. And that's what we want to see is have these codes be part of a plan. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to use them to collect people, I'm going to use them to drive coupon downloads, and then the next time I'll be able to just message those coupons directly to those people. So make sure that you're on a plan and a path and you're looking for key metrics to help you make those decisions rather than just continually dipping toes in water, because that doesn't get us anywhere.
I think the answer is, if you can come up with one universal and obvious use case that everybody starts using it for, and that's the one thing that's the hook, once people get that habit down, then people will come back. And I think the example, I'm going to lose all credibility on this panel right now, but the one thing that I have is, I have my really crappy BlackBerry still, even though I have an iPhone 5, because it's easier to type, and I walk around and people think that I'm a big genius, because I slapped on the back of my crappy thing my Citibank NFC mobile wallet payments thing. And because it's so crappy, I can stick the plastic back on. And the fact that I'm going around in a taxi and I can just scan my phone like this and pay for it every single time living in New York City, it's a no-brainer. I use it all the time. And now I'm like, what else can I do this with? And so, and it's unfortunately money every time I do it. But I find that one use case actually changes my whole outlook in terms of wanting to use NFC. At the beginning, I was not a proponent of NFC. I'm like, who the hell is going to use this? And there's just one use case of using it in the taxi is like genius. I want to use it every time. And it's like Frankensteinian, I guess that's not even a word, capability where, Google Wallet isn't available in most devices, certainly isn't available, obviously not available on the iPhone 5, but by just slapping this little thing on the back of my battery case, it actually has changed my life in terms of making it easier.
So we look at this, because I hear the get one usage scenario right argument, right? And that makes some sense. It's always go deep and prove it first before you go broad. We're leading that a little bit and saying, you know what we're hearing from large retailers, large brands, big sporting venues and things like that is, look, I don't know exactly what technology I'm going to deploy. It might be QR on some packaging, it might be NFC, it might be RFID down to the individual tags, it could be snap tags, it could be whatever they choose to do. The thing that they don't want to hear is the technology choice they make on that identifier is something that they're going to have to replicate the platform to support it. Right? They want to say, look, if it's in that chair, right, that package for that chair, and if it's an NFC tag, or if it's a QR code, or if it's a UPC code, or if it's an RFID tag, I want it to resolve to the same content. I don't want to have to do the same thing 4 or 5 times and then figure out how I synchronize all of that. So we kind of look at this and say, I can't just single thread what the use case is going to be. I have to actually give a smarter solution for the brand or the retailer or whoever's working with us at the platform level to let them do whatever they want to do on the technology front. There's panels about QR codes, but we've brought up a number of others. So it's really that's kind of the abstraction layer that I look at it through. It's QR codes are great, right? They're 0.0004 cents to print them. NFC costs slightly more than that, right? right? RFID tags cost, 7 orders of magnitude more than that, as opposed to only 5 like NFC. So, it does have a use case associated with it, it does have a cost structure associated with it, but we really don't tend to care. So if we have a great use case that people want to use it for, that's awesome. So to your case, let them do that with it. But if they want to do something else with it and use a different technology for it, so long as it maps, it's easy for the person who's trying to manage that, the better.
Does anyone think in the panel that there, in an ideal world, there would be some type of clearer use case for consolidation among these different technologies? It's got to be a little confusing for a marketer to keep so many acronyms in their head. They can't even remember how to not put typos in their QR codes. Right?
Yeah, Harry's example, I can see how that would be totally transformative if you live in New York, right? So I don't think that there's, and I think Mike hit the nail on the head, right? Which goes back to the notion that what we're talking about doing here is figuring out how you build bridges from these digital devices with these shiny screens to the land of marketing over here. And those bridges, some of them may be QR, some of them might be a snap tag, some of them might be NFC. I think approaching it from a platform perspective so you can handle all those things makes sense, because what we're seeing, lots of promise, lots of interest in NFC, single-digit penetration on the consumer side, and it requires a POS solution as well, right? QR codes, what's the barrier there? Well, you got to have a camera on your phone. Everybody's got one of those. You have to have an app, not so hard. And we're seeing, there's some other examples we haven't talked about, right? What I'm seeing, there's a proliferation. I've always thought that NFC, one of the killer things there might not just be payments, but would be loyalty and tracking and just, getting all that, all my personal, management of things. And we're seeing that happen. We're seeing startups like Level Up out there who are using QR codes to do payment and then, track how many sandwiches you bought. So you see Amazon with the scanner built into the app, facilitating showrooms. So I don't think it's back to Evan's question, I don't think there will be a single use case that's killer for everybody, but I think what you're seeing is a proliferation of useful ways that people can use this technology. And then once they do it and they see the value, then you've gotten over a big barrier. And maybe some of the, I'm an optimist, maybe some of those experiences are going to suck, but you're going to go, well, that experience sucked. Doesn't mean I'm not going to scan something again because I want to compare prices and I want to get product, So I think that I think we're in a very normal space for what is, going to be inevitably a big part of our digital world going forward.
Yeah, we haven't hit that. Harry's got it right? Let's look at NFC in Japan. The reason NFC took off in Japan is that it was first driven through the transit system. Most everybody uses the transit system. It became a faster, smarter, easier way to use the transit system. People got used to that. Then it expanded.
Right. But the other thing that happens there, just to, pardon the interrupt, right, is that you had top-down, direction as to what the handset technology is going to be. Yep. So very different. You will put NFC in all the handsets. Yep. Boom, done. Right. That's not the world we're living in here in the U.S.
No, definitely. And I think then the other problem is
that will be there. I think that will be there within 2 years. Every device will have every then coming out device. Every Android device will have it, I believe, and an iPhone will definitely come out in the next.
So even if they do have it, at the end of the day, I got to look at this from a cost perspective, right? So is every magazine ad going to have an NFC tag on every page?
No.
Of course not, right? So we've already accepted, just on the cost argument, that there's going to be multiples. What we have to do is create a user experience where people are like, okay, I have an expectation that I can interact with this thing. Now, codes broke through that now that people look at it and they say, oh yeah, that's a code. Now, most people, or at least we're now in the case within the US, have said, I've scanned one if I have a smartphone. So we've gotten over the barrier of, what is that, a typo? Did the printing press break, and why is that ugly black thing there, right? So we passed that phase, and now we're at an expectation. If I take my phone out, it's going to do something. We're not at this stage yet where if I take my phone out and I tap it against random things that all of a sudden it's going to cost me money. People don't have that expectation yet. I can't wait till they do, because quite frankly, I more value to my platform.
In New York. Anyone, just because is this a 2 to 3 year thing, 2 to 5 year thing? Like, which part? Because the more common, larger percentage of people doing use cases that are going to help marketers get a better handle on when it is worth an extra 5 cents to do technology A versus technology B.
It's growing month over month. It's growing month over month, and if the next iPhone supported NFC, you'd see a step change in NFC usage. But my view again is, this is the promise of mobile, right? You know, this has been a slow burn for 10 years, and we started a hockey stick in 2007, 2008, and you know, so I don't know. Maybe someone else thinks that there'll be some, you know, event which suddenly changes things. But to me, this seems like just blocking and tackling and diffusion of technology.
Sorry, I don't know that it's necessarily the proliferation of technology that'll drive it. I think it is that strategy and standardization of marketers using them to drive valuable actions. Because I think if I had an iPhone or an NFC, if I had it in my iPhone right now, I don't know that I'd use it. You have to give me a reason to use it. And so I think that same kind of, what we're up here trying to preach for codes goes true for NFC. So I think that's what's got to break through, is the usefulness of the technology. And that's what brands have to focus on, and then be almost agnostic, not agnostic, but you know, it's not about the activator, it's about the value behind it.
Yeah, I think, Nicole, you just nailed it, right? Which is that just like mobile is not a channel, right? QR codes are not a medium. They are part of a strategy, right? So if you think about them strategically and integrate them into your customer customer activation or customer acquisition or customer retention and loyalty strategies, now you're onto something, and that's when I think we'll see the change. Until we do that, they're just that weird-looking blob on a page.
Okay, I think we want to actually, we can go on for much longer, but I think we're sure we're going to have some questions. Let's leave a little time for questions.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I've got one question first
Sure.
for John. You've had a lot of experience with codes with Stop and Shop. Can you talk a little bit about what you've learned? Because you guys were scanning things in people's supermarket before it was even done on smartphones.
Yeah, so it was, you know what's been interesting is, so I joined, so Catalina bought a company called Motive Media in April of this year. It's an in-store mobile commerce company, and I joined that back in January of 11, and I remember going to my first NRF, it was literally my second day, and the CIO of one of the big POS vendors said to me when we were talking about mobile, he said, no customer will ever scan a code in a grocery store with their smartphone. I don't know if he still has a job because I don't remember his name, but the point is they do, right? I mean, we see, you know, just with mobile, right, we handle, gosh, I think it's 30 million product scans a month. And it's, you know, the data is unbelievable. People don't have a problem taking their phone out and using it, but it's part of a shopping experience. It's not just scan this and save 7 cents on Doritos. It is actually part of an integrated experience. So I think that therein lies the key, which is if it's built into the behavior and it's not disruptive, then I think you'll get the adoption. And we've seen a surprising uptick in it.
I think that, oh, I'm sorry, it's Patrick Moorhead, Catalina. Something that we
I'm
haven't...
not answering this question.
Hey, John, how are you? Hey, John. So, my question is, there's an ocean of existing UPCs. Literally an ocean. And so, I'm interested to hear from the panel, like, why are we creating a new kind of code when there's an entrenched ecosystem of existing codes that it seems like we could leverage?
Well, we're not creating a new one, we're leveraging a previously existing technology to replace UPC codes, but I'll let these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. There's two answers I'll give, and I'm sure everybody has a slightly different perspective. The UPC code fundamentally is intended for logistics, supply chain, factory, things like that. So I can't change what that code means because ocean liners stop and factories break things and stuff like that. So there's no flexibility at that level. Now I can do things like recognize it and present a unique experience, but I'm doing that as me, a vendor, ScanBuy only. For me to give a UPC experience, so if I were to go into, let's just pick a Best Buy and try and say, obviously your experiment isn't working, let's do it this way. Instead, I represent, you know, my 60 million scanner copies of software that's installed represents, you know, 8% of the marketplace. They're going to say, get out of the door. I got to come with 60% market share to do that. But it's an app controlled thing. QR codes don't have that limitation on them, that I can actually go and say, no, everybody who scans this code, regardless of the app you're using, you're gonna get this experience out of it. So I get to scale a heck of a lot faster. That's kind of the best answer. The other thing is, because it is somewhat of a best efforts thing, that anybody who's producing any kind of reader has done, and we've done this, I think, the best in Spain. We're in a dominant market share in Spain. We were able to pull it off. We do a best efforts lookup. So we look at the UPC and we say, do we know what it is? Now, there is no universal lookup of like, yep, here's exactly what that product is, and here's what it's made of, and all of that. So we have to do a best efforts crawl. But in Spain, we were able to actually work with all of the brands, 25,000 of them, to get them to give us data that says, here's exactly what's in the product, here's the allergen information, here's the drug interaction information, here's all the extended product information that can't fit on the label. So if you scan it in Spain, you get 100% right all the time, which is awesome. To do that anywhere else in the world...
Is that UPC you're talking about?
That's UPC, yeah. But to do that anywhere else in the world, I mean, the US is going to take us another 8 years to pull that deal together, right? Because there's just no unifying force. It's not like every carrier distributes only my app. So the market dynamics in the US make it hard.
I'd just like to throw something on there. I think using the UPC code from a brand perspective leaves it up for grabs. And if I scan that with Red Laser, it's going to give me this experience. If I scan it with, if you've created a relationship with ScanBuy to make their app actually take you somewhere else, then you're completely leaving it up for grabs. And if you're using a snap tag or a QR code that's dedicated for a program, one, you completely control the experience and you're locking down that experience. And two, you can make that experience completely dynamic. So I think that's the value proposition to the brand, is to control and own the experience.
Okay, so it's a unit that's made more for marketing than for inventory management. We have another?
Go right here.
Hi, Dave Schulte from Zamoga. A couple days I'm headed down to Orlando to see a client of mine who's a pretty major amusement park. And they've had some issues in the past where they've done QR code deployments and just really didn't see any interaction rates. So I'm just curious, any thoughts about in that kind of an environment, what kinds of uses for QR codes would make sense?
It's very simple. Give them something that they want. So in other words, you scan the code, you get a buck off your Coke, or you get a free Coke. Guarantee you, the rate's going to go way up.
What's your client trying to do?
To be honest, they're not really sure. I mean, they're looking at augmented experiences, going into next year. And so there's a wide variety of different things that they're trying to
I think
accomplish.
the first question I'd ask them is, in 6 months, we execute this program and you look back and it was the most successful program you ever could have imagined, what happened? Because that forces them to think about what they're trying to drive, and then you can work backwards at how do you do that.
So can I ask a follow-up question then? So any thoughts about trying more limited experiments with QR codes versus a big deployment?
There's
That you
actually-
learn from.
There's a way in the middle that I'd recommend, and it's a little bit more of a bet on their, or experimentation on their thing up front, which is, fine, let them deploy it. But use the dynamic nature of the codes to be able to say, okay, look, do you want to test for, the nearest bathroom is go left as opposed to go right? Do you want to test for, there's a special on French fries if you go to the restaurant over to the left? I mean, but if you have dynamic codes, they can try all of these things and see which one gets the kind of results that they're looking for. Do you want to try and push photographs of them when they got off the roller coaster, right? I mean, all of these things are possible, but if you give fixed codes out there, then you better be right? So you're kind of rifle shotting it at that point. So if they're not clear what they want to do, go in and sell them on a comprehensive, here's a bunch of things that we're going to test for you, and you decide what you want.
And even further, track the medium. So put a different code on the different medium to know that signage or the brochure when I walk in or on the ticket back, so that you're able to understand and tell them what's actually driving activation.
Strategy.
A/B testing. I think that's it. Okay, that's all we have time for. I want you to thank our awesome panelists. Thank you guys.
Thank you all. The next session will be at 2 o'clock on the 5th floor.